You have come here seeking truth, perhaps not fully aware of what you are asking for. But truth, when it emerges from the deepest caverns of the psyche, is never gentle. It is not the tranquil light of dawn, but the disorienting flare of lightning in the midnight forest. And so I must warn you, if you desire to know why you keep feeling emotions that are not your own, you must be prepared to encounter the darkness within yourself, not the shadows you casually ignore, but the ancient, unacknowledged phantoms that cling to your soul like a second skin. You are not merely a vessel for your own feelings. You are a porous being, a membrane upon which the emotions of the world impress themselves, often without your knowledge and sometimes even against your will. This mystery has tormented many sensitives, those who find themselves weeping without cause, anxious when the room is calm, enraged in the presence of someone who has offered no offense. And they say to themselves, "This is not mine." And yet they suffer. The modern world has no patience for such mysteries. It labels you with clinical terms, offers tablets to sedate your inner resonance, and tells you to guard your boundaries. But the psyche is older than psychiatry. The unconscious has no respect for the fences we build around our identities. The true self does not end at the skin. When a person feels emotions that are not their own, the first question they must ask is not, how do I stop it? But whose emotions have I made a home for? You see? We are not isolated islands of consciousness. We are part of a vast ocean, a collective unconscious that connects all humanity. Within this sea, archetypes move like primordial whales, ancient and vast, each carrying patterns of thought, fear, desire, and suffering that transcend personal history. When you are near another human being, especially one who is not conscious of their own darkness, their shadow leaks into your aura. It spills through their words, their glances, their silences. And if you are open, perhaps too open, you become the stage upon which their repressed feelings play out. The empath becomes the mirror, but not all mirrors reflect clearly. Some distort. And sometimes what you feel is not merely reflected pain, but absorbed chaos. You are not feeling with them, you are feeling for them. And therein lies the danger. To take on another's emotions without awareness is to become possessed by a ghost that is not your own. You do not heal them. By doing so, you only injure yourself, and worse, you delay their own confrontation with their shadow. The phenomenon is as old as myth. Recall the tales of shamans, those archetypal healers who enter trance states and take on the sickness of the tribe. They do not heal by suppressing symptoms, but by embracing the madness and walking through it with eyes wide open. But they are trained, anchored by ritual, protected by myth. The modern empath, by contrast, has no rite of passage, no psychic armor, no symbolic container for their gift. They are raw, vulnerable, exposed to possession because, yes, the word is appropriate, possession. You are possessed when a feeling overtakes you that is not sourced in your conscious psyche. When it speaks with a voice you do not recognize. When it demands you act against your values or collapse into despair with no apparent cause. Let me speak plainly. This possession is not merely metaphorical. The psyche contains within it autonomous complexes, clusters of energy and memory that behave as if they were separate personalities. And when you unconsciously absorb another's emotions, you may awaken such a complex within yourself. It takes on the color of your neighbor's grief, but it finds fertile ground in your own unhealed wounds. Their pain resonates with your forgotten sorrow. Their fury echoes your unspoken rage. And soon, you no longer know where their story ends and yours begins. This is the problem with identity in the age of hyperconnectivity. You are exposed to the feelings of strangers, to their traumas, their terrors, their unintegrated archetypes, and the psychic boundary between self and other grows thin, especially if you are unanchored in your own shadow. The person who denies their own darkness is most susceptible to emotional contagion, because the shadow does not vanish when ignored, it grows stronger. And it disguises itself in the emotions of others. You say, I feel their fear, but what you are truly feeling is your own disowned fear, awakened by theirs. Their shadow calls to yours like a secret twin. We must descend here into dream work, for dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. And in dreams, you will often encounter figures, parents, lovers, children, strangers who cry out in terror, who suffer, who accuse you of crimes you never committed. You awaken disturbed, heart pounding, drenched in guilt or sadness or longing that has no reference in waking life. And you ask, why do I feel so heavy? That dream figure was not simply a symbol, it was an aspect of your psyche that carries the emotion you have refused to feel while awake. And often it is linked to a real person in your life whose energy you have absorbed, internalized, and then buried. I once treated a woman who could not stop weeping in the presence of others. It did not matter whether they were joyful or sorrowful. Her body responded as though the room were a funeral. Upon deeper analysis, we discovered that she had never mourned the death of her mother in childhood. And so every other sadness she encountered echoed into the cavern where her personal grief had been locked away. She believed she was empathic. In truth, she was leaking. She was a vessel with a hole in it. And through that hole poured the grief of the world. It is not empathy to drown. It is martyrdom. And martyrdom does not serve the soul. You must ask yourself, when you feel something strong and sudden, whose voice is this? Does it have the taste of my mother's anxiety, the scent of my father's rage, the echo of my ex, lover's manipulation? Archetypes often carry inherited emotion, passed down like mythic scripts. The wounded child, the betrayed lover, the eternal victim, the hero's guilt. If you do not know which archetype has taken the stage in your psyche, you will mistake its pain for your own, and when that happens, you are no longer free. Freedom, in the Jungian sense, is not the absence of influence. It is awareness of influence, to feel what another feels and know it as theirs, even as it reverberates in your body, to stand in the fire and not become the fire, to look into the abyss and say, this is not my descent. But this awareness can only come when you have made peace with your own emotional inheritance. If you have not explored the grief that belongs to your childhood, the guilt that belongs to your family system, to the shame that was passed to you like a cursed heirloom, then all emotion becomes suspect, all feeling is fused, You become a sponge, soaked with what does not belong to you. There is another danger I must address. When you unconsciously absorb another's feelings, especially someone you love, you may begin to believe that your suffering is proof of love. This is a dangerous lie. Love does not require you to bleed in silence, to carry another's burden while your spine collapses. That is not love. It is emotional possession disguised as devotion. And many sensitive souls fall into this trap. They conflate enmeshment with compassion. But compassion, true compassion, requires boundaries. Christ did not carry every person's cross, only his own. You must learn this sacred truth. You cannot save someone by feeling their pain more deeply than they do. In fact, your absorption of their pain may shield them from facing it. This is the tragic paradox. In trying to protect them from their sorrow, you carry it for them. But in doing so, you become a repository for their unconscious. They do not grow. You do not heal. And your relationship becomes one of energetic theft. They offload, you absorb. They forget, you suffer, and the cycle continues until one of you awakens or dies a little more each day. The path forward is not to harden yourself. The answer is not to become indifferent or numb. That is the opposite error. The path is conscious empathy. You feel it, but you observe it. You say, this anger does not originate in me. Let me see where it touches my own unhealed wounds. Let me allow it to pass through like a storm, without becoming the thunder. This requires inner work, meditation, shadow integration, dream analysis, ritual, art. Solitude, the tools of the mystic and the analyst must merge. I will pause here, and in the next part, we will journey deeper into the mystical anatomy of possession, the role of projection, and how the archetype of the healer is often cursed with the very disease it tries to cure. And so I urge you now, listen carefully. The world is saturated not only with visible forms and concrete objects, but with subtle residues of feeling what I once described as the psychic atmosphere. It is real. It is potent. It surrounds us like invisible fog, carrying with it all that mankind refuses to face. The unwept sorrows of mothers, the rage of rejected children, the lusts of unrestrained egos, the despair of forgotten men. All these are not lost to time, but suspended in the collective field like electricity in the clouds before a storm. When an individual walks into a room and suddenly feels a weight upon the chest, or a strange anger that was not there moments before, this is not hallucination. It is psychic resonance. The psyche, in its more permeable forms, can function like a tuning fork to the field of human emotion, especially for those sensitive, intuitive souls who walk through life with open eyes and a permeable skin, not of the body, but of the soul. These people, often identified today as empaths, have no proper psychological training to understand what occurs. They merely suffer. They assume, this is mine. This sadness belongs to me. But no, I say to you oftentimes, it is not yours. It is the unintegrated shadow of another passing through your field, like a ghost seeking flesh. Yet do not make the mistake of believing that because it is not yours. It has no effect on you. That which is unclaimed by others seeks a host. This is the chilling truth I wish you to hear. If others will not feel, someone must. Nature abhors a vacuum. What is denied in one psyche spills into the next, and if you are unaware of these laws, you may unconsciously take in what was never yours to carry. The child who absorbs the mother's depression, the lover who mirrors the unspoken grief of a partner, the therapist who finds themselves drowning in the moods of patients, they are all manifestations of the same law. To the untrained observer, this seems like compassion, but to the psyche, it is a form of subtle colonization. Your boundaries dissolve, and in comes the unlived life of another. This, my friend, is not empathy. It is possession. I have observed this phenomenon in dreams many times. A patient comes to me with a dream of walking through a house where every room contains someone else's suffering. They try to clean it, to rearrange the furniture, to make it livable, but the house is not theirs. And still, they feel responsible. Why? Because deep within their childhood, they learned that survival meant absorption. Absorb the rage, so father doesn't strike. Absorb the sadness, so mother doesn't crumble. And now, as adults, they mistake emotional osmosis for love. This is why I caution the sensitive souls among you. The path of individuation is not the path of martyrdom. To feel everything is not to be wise, it is to be porous. And unless you learn to discern what is yours from what is not, you will live your entire life in a maze of mirrors, reacting to phantoms as if they were your own. It is here that we must speak of the archetype of the wounded healer. You who feel too much, you are often drawn to others in pain. Are you not? You are called to help, to carry, to hold, but consider carefully what the myth of Chiron teaches us. He could heal others, but not himself. Why? Because he had not yet ceased identifying with the wound. The wound became his power. Yes, but also his prison. Do not make of your sensitivity a cage. Do not wear your openness like a badge of superiority. Instead, learn to descend into the dark cavern of your soul, and ask, what part of me needs this sadness? What unconscious agreement have I made to suffer for others? What ancient guilt am I attempting to repay with my pain? These are not questions for the faint of heart. They are questions that demand the courage of the alchemist, the one who turns lead into gold by passing through fire. And now we arrive at a most disturbing insight sometimes. What you call love is nothing more than a magnetic pact between two unhealed wounds. You feel another sadness, and you rush to soothe it not out of generosity, but because their suffering matches your own, their darkness validates yours. This is not love. This is co-possession, a subtle collusion of shadows masquerading as connection. Let us be clear, to love truly is to see the other as they are, not as a vessel for your projections. And to love oneself truly is to know the borders of your soul. To feel deeply and yet not be consumed, this is the work of a lifetime. And yet it begins with a single act, the recognition that not all you feel is yours. You are not a sponge. You are not the savior. You are a vessel. Yes, but vessels must be emptied, cleansed, and filled with intention, lest they become chalices of poison. If you do not learn this, the world will feed upon your light until nothing remains but a husk. I have walked through the dreams of many such individuals. They speak of being chased, drained, watched, and always the symbols are the same: bleeding hands, mirrors that reflect strangers, rooms filled with invisible noise. These are not coincidences. They are messages from the deep. You must begin to ask, whose voice is this in my head? Whose grief lives in my chest? Whose fear clutches my stomach in the night? Trace it back. Trace it past your parents, past the family mythologies, even past this lifetime, if you must. The soul remembers what the ego forgets. And it is only by remembering that you become free. Now I ask you again, with the full force of my voice, what if the emotions you carry are echoes of another's exile? What if your weeping is the uncried lament of an entire generation? What if your anxiety is the residue of a culture that refuses stillness? Would you still call it yours? Or would you begin the sacred process of return? Do you see now the sacred task laid before you? The task is not merely to feel no. That is only the beginning. The deeper work is to differentiate, for what is individuation, if not the process of learning what is truly you and what is the world's demand echoing through your nervous system like a forgotten storm. You cannot heal what is not yours by owning it. You must see it, witness it, acknowledge it without absorption. There is a terrible arrogance in assuming that by taking on another's suffering, you redeem them. You do not. You merely add to the sum of unconsciousness. The collective shadow feeds on unclaimed feeling. Yes, but it also feeds on false atonement. You are not the redeemer of your mother's sadness. You are not the balm for your father's rage. These patterns were laid before you. Long before you drew your first breath, the sins you think are yours are sometimes ancestral, and they demand not sacrifice, but clarity. Let me take you deeper now into the realm of symbols, where this emotional possession often reveals itself with startling precision in the dreams of the possessed. I have often seen snakes winding through the spine, rooms with no windows, children crying behind, locked doors. These are not mere hallucinations. They are communications from the unconscious, revealing how deeply the boundary between self and other has been breached. The snake, in its dual nature, is healer and deceiver. The child behind the door, your inner voice, silenced by the cacophony of others' pain. You may think you are simply too sensitive, but what you call sensitivity, I call unbound psychic permeability. You have not been taught to anchor the self within the storm, and so you drift, you absorb, you mistake the weather of the world for your own climate. That is not compassion. That is amnesia. This is why I say to become whole is to reclaim your psychic territory, to plant a flag not in defiance, but in remembrance. You must remember who you are beneath the layers of inherited despair. And this cannot be done by numbing or avoidance. No, it requires confrontation. You must stare into the abyss, not the glamorous abyss of drama or fantasy, but the mundane abyss of familial pattern. ancestral entanglement, and generational pain. You must know where your emotion ends and the collective begins. Only then can you begin the sacred art of emotional transmutation. You ask how to begin. I say this when an emotion arises. Do not rush to identify with it. Pause. Ask, what is its voice? What memory does it bring? Is it mine, or is it familiar because I have carried it before? If the answer eludes you, dream on it. Wait. Let the symbol arise. The unconscious is never silent, only ignored. In time, it will show you the truth, often through image or metaphor. Perhaps you will see yourself wearing another's clothes, or a bird trapped in a cage. These are not idle fantasies. They are your soul's commentary on its condition. But do not fear this work. Though it begins in darkness, it ends in sovereignty. I have seen patients step out of emotional slavery and into profound presence, not by rejecting feeling, but by purifying it, by holding it up to the light of their own soul and asking, does this nourish me or drain me? Does this guide me to truth or tether me to illusion? Remember this, always emotions are not facts. They are messengers, but they do not always carry your message. Some come bearing the cries of the tribe, others carry the burdens of the bloodline, and still others are echoes of the collective unconscious itself, rumbling through your depths like distant thunder. And if you are sensitive, you will hear that thunder. You may even feel its tremors in your bones. But hearing is not the same as embodying. You are not required to become the storm simply because you sense it. You are required only to know it, to bow to its presence without mistaking it for your own identity. This is maturity of the soul. To walk through the storm and say, this is not mine, and yet I honor it. To meet the sadness of the world, not with collapse, but with presence. That is the calling of the mystic. That is the courage of the individuated one. Let me give you a vision now, something that may guide you on your way. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast ocean. This ocean is the collective unconscious. It is filled with the dreams, traumas, and longings of all who have ever lived. The waves rise high with the grief of centuries. And you, my dear soul, are a vessel floating upon its surface. You may feel the rocking. You may hear the cries, but you must not drown. Instead, you must become the lighthouse, the one who remains anchored, even as the tides shift and swell. Your light is not for absorbing the sorrow of others. It is for illuminating the way back to themselves. And so your task is not to carry their pain, but to remain centered in your truth, so they may find theirs. I say again, not all you feel is yours, but everything you claim as yours shapes your destiny. Be discerning, be ruthless in your inner inquiry. Seek the origin of every tear, every tremor, and where you find it does not belong, return it, not with blame, but with blessing. Say, this is not mine to carry. I honor its journey, and I send it back to be seen. This is not cruelty. This is spiritual hygiene. And so I leave you for now with this final image. The empath who learns to draw boundaries is not becoming selfish. They are becoming sovereign, They are learning that the highest service is not self-sacrifice, but self-remembrance. They are walking the path of the wounded healer who no longer bleeds for validation, but breathes for clarity. And so, what shall we do? Standing here at the threshold of psychic liberation, while the ghosts of our ancestral pain still press upon the veil, we do not cast them out in anger, nor do we cling to them in misguided loyalty. We witness them. We acknowledge their right to exist without granting them dominion over our present self. Because you must understand what you do not separate from. You become, and what you unconsciously become, you will carry, and what you carry without knowing, you will eventually inflict. This is the quiet horror of unconscious empathy. It makes you a vessel not only of compassion, but of compulsion. You repeat what is not yours. Speak with voices that are not your own, and call it intuition. But true intuition arises not from entanglement, but from clarity, from a soul that has touched the depths of the collective and yet emerged with a sense of self intact. It is not a denial of feeling that brings you healing. It is the alchemical refinement of those feelings, sorting, transmuting, discerning. This is the spiritual technology of individuation. To feel the ache of the world and still know your name, to hear the ancestral wail and still choose your own tone, to touch the shadow and still walk toward the light. The shadow, of course, is not just yours. It is also theirs. Your parents, your tribe, your people, the dead who whisper through your cells. Many of the feelings you carry, those waves of guilt, sadness, terror, are actually memories without stories, passed down through the bloodstream. Looking for a voice, they are unspoken chapters of forgotten lives. They haunt your nervous system, not because you are broken, but because you are open. But you were not born to be a dumping ground for the unlived lives of others. You were born to live your own, and the path back to yourself is not paved with rebellion, but with recognition. Name what you feel. Ask it, whose are you? If it answers with silence or confusion, wait. Its truth will come through a dream, through a sudden insight, through an image that stirs the deepest parts of you. Perhaps you will see a woman in black robes weeping in a field. Perhaps a soldier kneeling by a grave. These are not hallucinations. They are ancestral truths, clothed in symbolic form. They do not want your pity. They want your witness. And once witnessed, you are free. You are no longer haunted. You become hauntless, not by numbing your heart, but by seeing with the eye of the soul. That is the work I call you into. That is the journey of every wounded empath who has carried too much and forgotten where they end. The most compassionate thing you can do for others is to become yourself, whole, boundaried, aware, because in doing so, you offer them a mirror of what it means to return to the self without violence. You become not a sponge, but a sacred stone, one that others can lean on, but not fall through. That is the archetype of the wise one, the sage, the anchor in the storm. Let us not romanticize pain any longer. Let us not worship the image of the suffering empath as if it were holy. Suffering is not a sacrament. unless it transforms. To suffer without awareness is to bleed meaninglessly, but to suffer into awakening this is divine. And so, may your suffering lead not to martyrdom, but to metamorphosis. May you weep the tears that are yours, and release the ones that are not. There is within you a still point, a sacred silence that predates your mother's sighs and your father's silence, a place where the soul rests untouched by the winds of projection. Go there, sit there, feel the contours of your truest self. That is the only anchor that will hold. You have mistaken absorption for connection, but true connection does not blur boundaries, it honors them. It says, I feel you, but I do not become you. I see you, but I do not vanish into your suffering. I love you, and therefore I will not lose myself to save you. The soul must have skin, psychic skin. Without it, you become a walking wound. Everything enters, nothing leaves. This is not enlightenment, it is erosion, and too many of you are eroding in the name of compassion. I tell you, compassion without containment is chaos. And you were not made for chaos. You were made for coherence. The archetype of the Divine Mother is not a martyr. She is fierce in her containment. She knows what is hers to hold and what must be returned to the earth. So too must you become fierce, ponderate, clear, not out of hardness, but out of reverence for your own soul and for the sacred path of others. You must let them carry their own sorrow. You must stop rescuing what was never yours to heal, because in doing so, you rob others of the dignity of their own transformation. You interfere with the alchemy of their becoming. That is not love. That is control disguised as care. I say again, what you feel is real, but it may not be yours. And the difference between feeling and ownership is the line that separates the lost from the found. So now, I invite you to release not the feeling, but the identification. Let the sadness move through you, but not build a home inside you. Let the rage pass, like a storm, without naming it as your child. Let the ache of the world visit you, but do not feed it with your identity. Stand at the doorway of your soul and say, you may pass through, but you may not stay. This is not coldness. It is clarity, and clarity is the beginning of freedom. You were not meant to be a sponge. You were meant to be a vessel, a chalice of the sacred, not a cistern of the broken. And so, as I close, I remind you of your task, not to numb, not to absorb, not to escape, but to differentiate, to know yourself, to hold the line between self and other like a sacred right. You are not everyone's savior. You are not the emotional landfill of your lineage. You are the living dream of your soul, awake at last, ready to reclaim what is yours and release what never was. Let this be the beginning of your return. Back to your breath, back to your body, back to your truth. And as you walk this path, remember the feeling may arise within you. But your freedom lies in knowing whether it belongs. Only then will you stop drowning in the tides of other people's pain. Only then will you finally, truly be free.